This video is sponsored by Cake Wallet, the easiest open source wallet to store Bitcoin, Monero, and Litecoin securely on mobile and desktop devices. When buying, selling, and exchanging crypto or trading for gift cards, Cake Wallet ensures privacy and security, giving you the keys to your coins. What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Miss Teen Crypto Show. I'm your host, Randi Hipper, here again on a great Friday. I hope you guys are doing well. We have a very special guest today, but before we get into today's special guest, I may need to make sure you guys are checking out Cake Wallet. You're liking, subscribing, commenting in the chat, and sharing the stream out with friends so more people know about today's guest. I'm not going to waste anyone's time. Let's introduce Michael Saylor. Welcome to the show. How are you?
Thanks for having me, Randy. Friday.
I know it's Friday, as I like to call it, a day to sit back, relax, and talk about Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, and reflect on everything that's going on right now. But before we talk about the current times in Bitcoin, I want to talk about you, Michael, young Michael Saylor. What were you up to at the end of high school, going into college? What did you think you were going to do with your life? What were you interested in?
I grew up on Air Force bases.
Wow.
All around the world. So I was Air Force brat. And in high school, I guess I came of age when there were 4 honorable professions for a teenage male. Rock star, astronaut, professor, or CEO. So those were, and rock star could be like rock star / astronaut. Sorry, no, it was rock star, astronaut, fighter pilot. So it's like either a fighter pilot leading to astronaut or just one or the other. And then professor and CEO. So I started wanting to be a rock star when I was in high school. And my senior year, I saw a band playing at a May Day festival, and they were all really good. And I thought I thought they could all sing and they could all play and they were extraordinary. And I walked up afterwards and I said, "How much did you make for the gig?" And it worked out to be like $30 each for the musicians. And I concluded that it might be risky to be a rock star. And I had won a scholarship to MIT, an Air Force scholarship. So I thought, well, maybe I should go to MIT and get an engineering degree, because at least I'll be able to make enough money to buy my amplifier and pay for my electric guitars and the like. So it seemed like a safe thing to do. So I took the scholarship. I went to MIT and I studied aerospace engineering, spaceship design. Wow. So along the way, I kind of figured, well, I'll design spaceships, be a fighter pilot, be a test pilot, be an astronaut. And that worked out well until my senior year at MIT. And I was misdiagnosed with a heart murmur that disqualified me from being a fighter pilot. So depression set in, because if you can't, this is like Top Gun era. You can imagine telling a 21-year-old alpha male that he can't be a fighter pilot, or, if you can't be a fighter pilot, you can't be a test pilot. And if you can't be a test pilot, you can't be an astronaut. So all of a sudden, my world was turned upside down, and I guess I'd lost touch with the rock star thing. I'd probably concluded that I wasn't going to be a rock star, and I wasn't going to be the fighter pilot. So I decided I wanted to be a professor, and I was going to get a PhD. But it costs a lot of money. And as you remember, I said I went on an Air Force ROTC scholarship, but I didn't have a scholarship for the PhD, and it was obscenely expensive. So I thought I'll work in the real world for a year, 2 years, and I'll apply to all the PhD programs and I'll apply for a fellowship. So I started working and I built computer simulations. Turns out nonlinear system dynamics simulations, simulations of complex systems. And this is interesting because economics is all about complex systems. Like if you raise the price, you get more of the product. And if you put a price control, then you get less of the thing and you get shortages. So learning to create the dynamic, or learning to simulate or predict the dynamic behavior of a complicated system is interesting. It's a good formative experience. So that's what I did in my early 20s. And at age 24, I got the fellowship. I was into the MIT PhD program, and I was ready to go back and get my PhD and be a professor. And when I tendered my letter of resignation, my employer wanted me to finish this computer program I was working on. And they wanted it done because they were using it to justify about $1 billion capital investment in one of their businesses. And it wasn't my $1 billion. So I didn't really have a lot of skin in the game, but they wanted the billion. And I said, I'm just going back to school. And they said, well, what can we do to convince you? And I went back to my checklist of rock star, no, fighter pilot, no, I'm going to be a professor. Yeah, there was only one thing left on the list, was be a CEO. And since no one's going to make me the CEO, I figured I had to start my own company to be CEO. And I said, the only thing I really want is to start a company and be CEO. So if you will finance that and set me up in business, then I'll defer going to college or going back. So they thought about it and they decided that they wanted that computer program finished. So I was able to hire my staff at DuPont. That was the company I was working at. And they gave me, I think I got many millions of dollars of early contracts. And I was able to start up the company and be the primary shareholder and the CEO. And I figured, well, I'll just do this till it fails. And the first year there was like 9 employees, and the next year it was 12, and then it was 20, and then it was 40, and then it was 80, and then it was 160, and it kept doubling and doubling and doubling. And at some point, I realized I wasn't going to fail and I wasn't going to get the PhD. So that was MicroStrategy. And I'm still at MicroStrategy. And yeah, I still wouldn't mind being a professor, but in a roundabout way, Randy, I kind of became a professor,
You did.
after the lockdowns, but not the way I expected I would be.
I feel like life isn't what you expect a lot of the time. Just like you expected to maybe be a rock star, then you wanted to be a pilot, then you didn't expect to get that like misdiagnosis with the heart murmur, and things kind of just went a different path for you. But I feel like it's all nothing you expect in life. And what connected you to music? I know you said you had a guitar that you wanted to play. What connected you to music? What connected you to want to be a pilot?
Well, the connection to music was just I played in every band in junior high and high school, the stage band, the jazz bands, and the concert bands,
Just
and the
guitar though?
rock band. I started playing saxophone,
That's fancy.
and I played saxophone in the marching band, but then I realized that all the really cool dudes played brass instruments, so then I switched to the trombone, and I ferociously learned to play the trombone over the break in the summer, and then I came back as a trombonist. And then I learned to play the bass guitar and then the guitar. And so I meandered from this thing to that thing. And so that, yeah, I just like music. I mean, who doesn't like music, right? Music is built into your DNA. I have some parrots. They like music, right? Like
Yeah.
dogs like music. All animals like music. So the fighter pilot thing came out of the Air Force. I grew up on Air Force bases. So I was always around pilots. I was always around airplanes. I was around the flight line. And also, I think by 3rd grade, I was very big into science fiction. So I loved science fiction. I read all the science fiction of the age, especially the works by Robert Heinlein, Arthur C. Clarke, Isaac Asimov, and the like. And so there's a lot of spaceships and the like involved. So that's how I got involved in you know, piloting aircraft and interested in space.
I
And I
think,
guess,
well,
yeah, keep
continue.
going.
I think it's very interesting like be interested in sci-fi books at a young age, because it really, a lot of things in sci-fi really make you think about the future and what you maybe thought the future would look like. Did you think the future was going to look the way it does now, where everyone is on the internet all the time, everyone is transacting over the internet now, and even your company is based off of, just giving intelligence to other people?
Yeah, it's not really. I guess everything that's happened is pretty stunning, sometimes with technology, we linearly expect one thing and then we get the opposite thing. Like with aircraft, aerospace engineering technology advanced from 1903 to 1969 really fast, and then it stopped, hit a dead wall, hit a wall. We haven't put anybody on the moon since the Apollo program. And then the momentum shifted to semiconductors, and semiconductors just surprised everybody, and they came out of the blue, and then the PC business took off, and that turned everything upside down, and that advanced extraordinarily fast. And that's still advancing, right? I mean, Moore's law is just driving exponential improvement. And then when mobile came along, that turned everything upside down. So I think that in the history of technology, what you have is you have certain technical platforms that they're not viable until they are. And when they are, they burn very brightly for some number of years, and then they hit a wall and they stop. Like, say, nuclear energy, right? I mean, nuclear power was an extraordinary breakthrough, and we haven't built a nuclear power plant in 50 years. So sometimes things will race forward, and then they'll hit a wall and they'll stop, and then something else will kick in, like AI, right? People have been trying to make AI work for a decade, and it wasn't that impressive. And then all of a sudden, 2022, you have ChatGPT and Mid-Journey and these AIs, and now it's pretty clear every year for the next 10 years there's going to be something extraordinary there. So I think
Absolutely.
if you're a technologist, you kind of have to just wait until you see a certain platform commercialize. And when it starts to commercialize, then you can actually make a living. You can engineer great things. But, people are trying to fly for 500 years before the Wright brothers. And there's a very famous headline in the New York Times. It's like 60 days before the Wright brothers flew that declares that no one will ever fly. It's utterly impossible. So people have a tendency to try and fail for a long period of time, and then there's a breakthrough. Oftentimes by some uneducated engineer or some uneducated journeyman. I mean, the Wright brothers were bicycle shop mechanics, right?
Yes.
Nobody would have guessed that they were going to invent flight. There's a very famous example of John Harrison inventing a chronometer that allowed the British Navy to find longitude on the ocean. Solving the problem of longitude is a problem. It had not been solved in thousands and thousands of years. And every Newtonian professor of mathematics and astronomy and physics had failed. And John Harrison made clocks, his clockmaker. And a dude, like, you wouldn't think someone that makes clocks for a living would revolutionize the way we navigate on the ocean. But he made a really good clock, and he solved the problem by creating two clocks that kept perfect time. And one of them is set to Greenwich Mean Time, GMT, and the other one is set to local time. And you just subtract local time from Greenwich Mean Time, and that's how you get longitude. So we have that example throughout history, solving the problem of economics. How do you create a perfect economic system or perfect money, right? People had tried to solve it for thousands and thousands of years. Isaac Newton was the head of the treasury, of the mint, I guess, in London in his day. And so lots of learned people try to solve the problem of economics, and then along comes Satoshi. And Satoshi's kind of a cryptographer, systems engineer type computer engineer. And so it's a computer scientist that comes up with the perfect economic system, just like it's clockmaker that solves the problem of location, just like it's bicycle mechanics that teach you how to fly. And that's kind of the story of history. It's always someone that surprises you with some breakthrough from a field you didn't expect at a time you didn't expect it.
I think it goes with the saying fate loves irony. And the things you least expect is often what happens. Even before Satoshi, there were people that tried to make a digital currency, but they just couldn't make it work. There were many efforts at that failed. So when Satoshi's finally took off, and even people doubted it too, like people doubted the Wright brothers. People probably doubted almost every single entrepreneur, every single person that maybe invented something new. You could see that even today with maybe crypto projects or AI companies or different technology companies where people say, hey, that's never going to work. The internet itself, you could look at all of these news networks, the same people you watch now that maybe don't like Bitcoin. You could look at them like maybe 20 years ago talking about the internet. Why would you ever use the internet? Why would you ever put your information on the internet, buy something from the internet? It was just something that no one could even conceptualize until it happened, and it reached a point where maybe people can't ignore it anymore. I think that's just kind of the way life goes sometimes.
What's particularly beautiful about Bitcoin is that it is a perfect machine constructed of imperfect parts to be operated by imperfect people. And
I
so
love that.
the genius is, right? The genius is what we want to do is have millions and millions of computers that are all randomly interacting with each other. But we want to, on average, generate a block every 10 minutes. But, you know, sometimes it's 11 minutes and sometimes it's 2 minutes and sometimes it's 56 minutes. And so it's not actually 10 minutes, but because of the difficulty adjustment, which is a first order negative feedback loop, that first order negative feedback loop and enough transactions causes the entire system to dynamically target that 10-minute goal. And then we want to allow anybody in the world to create a Bitcoin mining rig, and we want to allow any engineer to make it work faster. Okay, so that's a very uncontrolled variable. Like any of 8 billion people can do as much Bitcoin mining as they want. And we can create, we can mine with CPUs and GPUs and first order ASICs and S9s and S19s and S19 pluses or pros. All these things are changing, and I can overclock them and underclock them, and there is no central ruler. But at the end of the day, what I want is the sum total of all human effort to result in the system generating exactly the right amount of Bitcoin, you know, in a issuance schedule over the course of hundreds of years. And that was achieved through all of these servo mechanisms, cybernetic feedback, if you will. And so that's interesting. And the fact that humans are greedy, and sometimes they're lazy, and sometimes they're greedy, and sometimes they're smart, and sometimes they're stupid and incompetent. And yet Bitcoin manages to function with all those types of people. And, you know, even here's another interesting twist. Some people say it's really hard to hold your private keys, or what if you lose your private keys, or what if you lose the Bitcoin? But the way Bitcoin is constructed, if people lose their Bitcoin, the value of the Bitcoin of everybody else goes up. And so the competent benefit from the incompetent, you see.
Exactly.
And the network burden shifts from the lazy to the industrious, and the overall parameters keep adjusting so as to create the ultimate scarcity. And you know where that pops up, Randy, in other areas of engineering? In aerospace engineering, when we design an airplane, we want it to be stable. So we set the wings so that they're slightly pointed up. And if you roll the plane to one side, the lift on the side you roll toward increases and it pushes you back to the middle. And if you roll to the other side, the lift pushes you back. Now, that same dynamic takes place in ocean engineering when you design a hull of a ship, where if the ship if it tilts to the left or rolls to the left, it'll want to come back to, if it rolls to the right, it'll want to come back to center. Now, when it's designed that way, it's called stable. If you actually lift the center of gravity above the water line, like put it in the air, like the reason you don't have like wrecking balls hanging over your yacht is if you roll to the left, it'll just flip over and capsize. And so unstable ships tend to capsize and sink. Stable ships tend to not capsize. And of course, stupid engineers sink all their ships, and smart engineers create ships that don't sink. And the same is true with stupid aerospace designers. When you're designing an engineering system, you want it to be stable. And, and of course, you're designing the system thinking, well, you know, the wind's going to blow me over, and, you know, the current's going to push me over, and there's eventually going to be a stupid person at the helm of the ship, and they're going to do the wrong thing. I need the machine to actually compensate in the right way to keep you from destroying yourself. And I'll give you one last point, or last example. When Harrison designed that clock, the way that the problem with chronometers, the reason they couldn't make them accurate is because all of the components in the clock expanded or contracted with humidity and temperature. So you can imagine if the clock temperature changes and the humidity goes up, then all the pieces expand and then the mechanism doesn't quite work. So to make a clock which works perfectly, you have to have one component that's expanding, and it has to be in opposition to the same component contracting. So if I know that you're going to pull this way and this one's going to pull this way, I reverse the component so that one piece is pulling to the left and the other piece is pulling to the right, and they cancel each other out with equal and opposite forces. And then the component doesn't pull. Yeah, see, it doesn't move. It doesn't deflect. So you have to be kind of like an evil genius or a little bit diabolical as an engineer, because you say, I know the conditions are imperfect. I know people are going to do stupid things. I need the machine to work, and I need for people not to be able to sink the ship. And this comes out of engineering. And sometimes this is common sense, right?
Yeah.
A lot of the problem with economics is the economist, they want to assume that they can control everybody. Like we're going to set the price of something, and then you have to keep producing it, even though I'm going to cap the price of it. And they assume they can tell people what to do instead of assuming that they don't have control of what the people will do. So engineered systems that are engineered to work on imperfect components operated under uncertain, volatile circumstances by imperfect human beings are actually perfect. They're things of beauty, and they're all around us. We oftentimes take them for granted, but if you are an engineer, like if you're a boater, and you have this beautiful boat that's very sexy, that's got all these sharp lines sitting in port. And then there's the boat that's not so beautiful, but it's got a deep V hull and it's steel. Well, the steel hull with the deep V, when you take it out in the water and the wind starts blowing, that one actually keeps you alive. And the sexy boat rolls over and capsizes, or it gets blown up onto a coral reef and you put a hole in it and you start to drown. What you find, of course, is the people at the boat shows, they like the sexy one that's non-functional. And the people that have actually lived at sea, they like the more nautical one that
The fundamentals.
is safer. Yeah. And so you have to live life in order to appreciate well-engineered instruments.
Exactly. And that kind of like ties into like our irony point from before, because even Satoshi, right, creating Bitcoin, they had to know that maybe there was going to be someone that would try to 51% attack the network. Let's prepare for that. How can the miners adjust if one group of miners just goes dark? Or even the irony of just having or trusting a trustless system, right? We necessarily don't have to trust Bitcoin to, halt our trading. If we want to trade Bitcoin, halt our, transactions, peer-to-peer transactions. But it's trustless in that sense, but we trust it not to do that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think the beauty of Bitcoin is a completely open protocol released to the world. So there were never any we call it rules without rulers, right? It's like perfect anarchy in a way. There's no one central governing body, and we release it to the world, and then we let self-interest spread it. So anybody can mine Bitcoin, anybody can run a node, and anybody can increase the amount they mine, and anybody can actually re-engineer the mining rig to make it work better. And so as long as the protocol is protected, the protocol is 21 million coins, enforced by the nodes, and this idea of a block that can't be more than 4 megabytes. And the open SHA-256 hashing protocol, which means anybody can create a better SHA-256 mining rig. When you actually leave that, then you inspire everybody on Earth to support your network, right? Because everybody can engage with it. When you start putting rules on, or you start trying to censor it or keep people off the network, the system becomes increasingly fragile and brittle, and eventually it collapses under its own weight. So Bitcoin was, it's an example of, I guess, a genetic algorithm. You can design it once. You have to release it into the wild. It's like a cyber virus of sorts, and the virus just moves from person to person, from company to company, from technology to technology, and everyone that adopts it benefits by adopting it, and then they make it better and they make it more anti-fragile. And it's fairly unique in that regard. I mean, a monetary protocol that's open, permissionless is first in the history of the human race.
I think open source everything and transparency is something that we really do need nowadays, because with social media, the way our data is used, the way we transact right now, nothing is open. We really just don't know anything anymore. And I think Bitcoin kind of woke people up to that fact that, hey, we have to be able to bring individualism back, be able to be independent and empower yourself and take responsibility for your actions. I know you mentioned, self-custody before, and people may not feel responsible for their coins, but I think we have to let go of that narrative of someone holding your hands. Like, you were 24 years old wanting to be the CEO of your own company. You already had that kind of crypto mindset of being your own boss, and then kind of traveling that down the road into being your own bank.
I think today I tweeted, I said Bitcoin is a natural right.
Exactly.
That was
Life,
the
liberty,
tweet.
and property.
It's like, and a lot of people haven't grasped that idea that Bitcoin is really the only property in the history of the human race that you can truly own. It's the only thing that you can take with you to the grave. It's the only thing that no one can take away from you with force. And that's a pretty profound idea. But let's think about the history of humanity. I teach you fire. And once you learn the trick of fire, then you don't have to ask anybody's permission to start a fire. I can drop you anywhere in the world and you know the trick of fire, you can start a fire. It's not easy to start a fire, right? You might burn yourself on the fire, but the point really is everybody in the world has the ability to take advantage of fire if they learn the trick. And it did elevate us, from all the other mammals, and it made a big difference to the human race. Let's say I teach you math. Maybe I teach you 4 plus 4 equals 8. I can teach you arithmetic. I can teach you algebra. I can teach you geometry. Geometry can be pretty useful at estimating, how to build a bridge or how to construct a shelter. Maybe I teach you calculus. Calculus and higher level math can be very useful when you're building structures if you don't want them to collapse on your head.
Used to love calculus.
No one could take it away from you. You see, once you've learned it, right, you don't have to ask permission to do math. I mean, the scientific revolution was an example of people saying, I'm going to teach you optics and math and the like, and you can actually create buildings and machines with it. And it is profound. So then I teach you language, English. You can think in it. You can communicate in it. You don't have to ask anybody's permission to do something with it. You can write your life history down. You can write things you want to remember down. It's kind of useful to be able to write and use words. Bitcoin is a monetary protocol. So it's another protocol, just like a math protocol, a language protocol, or fire, which is really a chemical. It's a chemical protocol or an energy protocol, if you will. They all matter. They're all types of knowledge. Once you understand it, nobody can take it away from you. And it is the basis of providing the utilitarian entitlement of property rights to 8 billion people. In a world without Bitcoin, your property rights come from owning land, owning gold, owning a company, owning a bond, owning a painting, owning a car. But the problem with that is that someone more powerful than you can just take it away from you. They either coerce you to take it away, or they just shoot you and take it away. Or when you flee the country, you have to leave it behind. And so all these other properties, they're what I call stationary, visible, mostly stationary, visible properties. And in a world where all your property is stationary and visible, then there is an encouragement to corruption and violence. The politicians and the mayor, the governor, the head of the country, they're going to tax your property. They're going to take it away. They're going to regulate it away. And there's nothing you can do about it. And if you're lucky enough to be loved by your country, then the foreign country, when they come across your border, they're going to take everything. So there's an incentive toward war, toward violence, and toward corrupt politics when all your property is visible. When your property is invisible and when it is mobile, when if we take, for example, Bitcoin that you've got self-custody of, well, if a nation invades your nation, the Bitcoin's not going to be there, or you can flee and take it with you. You can't take your building with you. You can't take
Exactly.
100,000 acres with you, right? So there's not much point to war if the property is going to move faster than the tanks and the ships. And then if the nation you live in, if it passes a property tax, on your home, 2% a year, well, they'll just take the entire place in 30 years. They're going to take your property in your lifetime and you can't move it. That's
Nope.
the state in most places where they just tax it away until you don't have any more. You ever heard the famous trope, lost the family farm because we couldn't pay the taxes.
It's horrible. It's a
it's
way
it's
to
a,
kind of keep you behind so you can't get ahead.
yeah, it's a human condition that, my grandchildren couldn't afford the taxes. They had to sell the family farm. Well, why is that fair? Why is that right? It's not really right, but it is what it is. If all your property was in Bitcoin, if it's digital property, when the county adds a property tax, you move to a different county. When the city has a property tax, you move to a different city. When the country has a property tax, you move to a different country. Right. And because it's hard to tax, they're not so likely to do it, because there's not much point in attacking someone that can run away. Right. What happens is it's survival of the fittest. The political system is going to attack the immobile. It's like we chop down the trees, but we don't chop down the people that run faster than us, or the people in the fighter jets. We don't chop them down. What's the difference? Right? It's the mobility. So I think that this is pretty profound, because Bitcoin allows 8 billion people to own their property, and it allows them to move their property. And we never had that before.
Exactly. Like you said, the evolution of money has always been, we've been trying forever to try to get a solid foundation of what is money, what's a sound economic system. And we're still to this day trying to figure it out. And what surprises me the most is Bitcoin's only 14 years old, basically a teenager trying to figure out what life is, spread its wings, and really figure out like what role it has to play in this world. And now, we're seeing a worldwide global attack against Bitcoin and maybe the whole crypto industry, where they don't want people to have ownership of their money. I was actually watching a clip from the president of the European Central Bank talking about central bank digital currencies. And the reason why they're scared of Bitcoin and they're scared of DeFi maybe is because they can't maintain their status as the monetary anchor that they have been for years. So again, this poses a threat to a traditional financial system that has been around for so long, has not been revolutionized in any way until Bitcoin came along and kind of combated that.
Well, I think the point that I would make there that's very important is, I don't think there's a worldwide attack on Bitcoin. I think that there's a worldwide regulatory crackdown on a lot of crypto ideas, like digital currency, a digital security, a digital exchange, and a digital token. But those are all related ideas, but they're not Bitcoin. If we take Bitcoin, which is the idea of a digital commodity, which is a store of value or digital property, that has been endorsed by 4 presidential candidates. Kennedy and DeSantis both have endorsed it.
Yep.
It has been endorsed by the head of the CFTC and the head of the SEC. It has been adopted. It has been acknowledged as a legitimate asset by the head of the European Central Bank and by the head of the Federal Reserve. And it has been acknowledged as an asset by the White House. So it has also been acknowledged by Fidelity and by BlackRock, right? The 2 largest money managers in the world. So if you're looking to the world to see, are they going to acknowledge Bitcoin as an asset class and as a legitimate crypto commodity? Well, I think you have your answer. There is no government in the world I'm aware of that's banning it. Even the Chinese aren't banning the ownership of Bitcoin. What they're attacking is potentially the mining of it, or the crypto trading. And there's a lot of controversy around, can I issue a stable coin? Can I issue a security that's a crypto token? Can I trade? Can I issue crypto derivatives? And we could talk about any of those things if you want. But the most important point to take away is you should separate Bitcoin from crypto. Crypto is about a dozen very progressive ideas, many of which are threatening to the establishment. Bitcoin is one overarching revolutionary idea, the idea of digitally transforming property and putting it in cyberspace. The separation of property from earth, the idea that that you could own $1 billion of property that's in cyberspace as opposed to $1 billion building, right? Sometimes we call it the separation of money from state, but really, a more profound idea is Bitcoin is the first tangible digital property in the history of the human race. And if it was nothing more than that, that's worth hundreds of trillions of dollars. It's a big, big idea. And you don't need to change the currency or change any other law, right? Every nation on earth would benefit from having trillions of dollars of digital property, because the digital property is the basis of the 21st century economy.
Yes, I agree, because growing up on social media, I understand that, I was buying digital property online all the time, digital gaming assets, digital tokens, except I didn't have ownership over those. And then you have to consider, if you were recording something as a Gen Z, if you didn't take a selfie, you weren't there, type of thing. So we understand the concept of digital property, but and especially money too. Having ownership of our funds, we see a lot of censorship happening worldwide. But it comes to a point where even I was reading the economic report of the president, and they were saying they didn't consider Bitcoin money. That only central bank money issued by a sovereign country was considered money. Do you think that's going to change, especially because in places like El Salvador, Bitcoin is legal tender, but we still have a pushback on what exactly they classify money as? And I think Bitcoin, maybe we'll get there where everyone acknowledges it as a currency. What do you think?
I think that you can decompose money into a property component and a currency component. And the property component is the long-term store of value, something I'm going to hold for 30 years. And the currency component is the short-term medium of exchange, something I'm going to spend every few minutes or every day. Currency is political, and nation states issue it. And they define an asset as legal tender. And when they define it as legal tender, you can transfer it without a taxable event. So you can, I can take dollars and I can transfer them 100 times a day, and they're not 100 taxable events. Property generates a taxable event. And so the issue with property is I'm never going to want to use property as, I think my computer is beeping, or your computer
I
is
think it's your
beeping.
computer that's beeping.
Can you just hold a second? Let me just check and see
No
if I can figure
problem.
out what's beeping here. I think it's an uninterruptible power supply that's beeping, and I want to spare your listeners of it. Hold on.
It's okay. Don't worry about it. If you guys are here and enjoying the interview, make sure you guys are smashing these likes, you are sharing the stream out with friends, and making sure you're commenting in the chat whether you guys are enjoying the stream and what your thoughts are so far. All right. There we go. All right. Make sure you guys, again, are checking out the stream. You guys are sharing this out. I see we have 300 people watching. Let's get 300 likes. Let's get some hype in the chat. If you are a member, make sure to drop those Bitcoin emojis in honor of Michael Saylor and Bitcoin and cryptocurrency. Again, this has been a really interesting conversation about self-sovereignty, about decentralization, transparency, what money is at the core. And of course, we're going to continue on the conversation and make sure that his computer is all good and we could continue on. Thank you guys for all the love in the chat, by the way. You guys are awesome in the chat. I'm just reading what's going on here. Again, throw in those Bitcoin emojis. If you guys have been keeping up with the news, you know that we are still bullish on Bitcoin. And thank you for everyone in the chat gifting over there. Awesome.
Okay.
All
Maybe
right.
I got it. We'll see.
Hopefully you did. I don't think everyone in the chat was saying that they didn't hear it, but thank you for keeping our audience in mind. They're very grateful for that.
Sorry.
But again, Bitcoin as money, right? Do you
Okay.
think if you want to continue on your point, you could definitely go ahead.
So the important point there is everybody needs a checking account and they need a savings account.
Indeed.
And the checking account is going to be the currency. The savings account is what you're holding to retire on or give to your children's children. So Bitcoin doesn't need to replace the currency to be useful or successful. If you live in Argentina right now, as long as there's an Argentine government, you're going to need the peso. And you're going to want probably 90 days worth of pesos. Then you're probably going to want 3 years or 1 to 3 years worth of dollars, the world reserve currency. And then all the rest of your money, you're going to want to convert into property. And your choice is either to buy stationary property like a ranch or a building or a company, or to buy Bitcoin. And so you see, sometimes people, they think that somehow Bitcoin won't succeed unless it becomes a currency, but that's not true. 95% of the wealth in the world isn't the currency, it's a property. And so if Bitcoin is simply the long-term savings account, it'll be fine. Just like if you owned a building, you don't need to use it to buy coffee. Right?
No.
Like if I gave you a building, you would take it. And if I then said, well, it's not valuable because you can't buy coffee with it, you would say, silly, I'm keeping the building. And if I want to buy coffee, I'll take a loan against the building. I'll put that into a savings account or I'll convert that into a checking account and then I'll fund my credit card, right? And then I'll buy coffee with it. So ultimately, I think you should just keep them separate. As long as there are nation states, there will be currencies. You don't need to be a currency. If you live in a war zone where there is no nation state, yeah, then you'll use Bitcoin to buy things. But if you live in the United States, you need the Bitcoin so you don't get poor over the course of your life. You don't need the Bitcoin to buy the coffee. You can use the dollar to buy the coffee.
Do you think that in the digital world that we're going to be using Bitcoin as currency every day, or you still think, again, it's going to be more of a property store of value? Or maybe we use other, digital currencies?
No, I think we'll use nation state currencies. We'll use the euro, the yen, the CNY, the dollar to buy things day to day. I think that Bitcoin is going to replace real estate and bonds and gold and second homes. Right? I mean, that's where all the money is, right? There's no rich person that's rich by owning dollars, right?
No way.
Rich people own city blocks in New York City.
Exactly.
So rich people are going to sell their city block in New York City for a block of Bitcoin. And then we're still going to use yen and dollars and CNY to buy coffee with. These currencies don't go away until the nation states go away. And you don't want the nation state to fail that you live in. It would be inconvenient for you.
I definitely agree with you. And I do think that Bitcoin just has, again, like it has that property aspect, it has that currency aspect. And of course, self-custody is a huge thing as well. Being open source, having that transparency. And I know you have Saylor.org, which I really enjoy as well, because you're inviting actually the younger audience to come learn about open source technology. Why is open source technology really important to you? Why do you feel like we need transparency in the digital age?
Well, I think with regard to money, it's important because there's no way to create a global monetary network without it being open. There's no way that 8 billion people are going to trust the network unless it's open. So that's why. With regard to education, I just think we need to give free education to everybody on Earth. And so you need to make it free, right? I mean, why do I want every book on the planet to be free? So you can read it. That's why I want it to be free. And there's no reason why it needs to cost money.
I agree. Knowledge should be free. Like, you go on YouTube every day and you get to educate yourself. And I think that is really special. And to bring, again, like education to people that maybe don't have the time to do the education and can come to your website and just really learn what they're, and especially in their niche, learn what they need to know, I think is really important as well. You have a lot of different initiatives, even Bitcoin for corporations, trying to not only educate people on maybe what they need to know with college and whatnot, but you're also educating Bitcoin for corporations. Why are you trying to onboard institutions? Do you think institutions are essential for Bitcoin succession?
Yeah, I mean, I think that Bitcoin's a solution for everybody. It's a solution for every company. It's a solution for every investor. It's a solution for every government. It's a solution for every individual, every family. So the institutions have a lot of the money and a lot of the responsibility in the world, pension funds, banks, et cetera. So we've been pursuing support for institutions because we want everyone to embrace this network, not just individuals like the Fidelities, the Vanguards of the world.
Absolutely. And Fidelity themselves have been really tech forward. I believe they've been mining Bitcoin themselves since 2014. So I think definitely institutions are going to realize that we're entering a digital age, and where money is going digital, might as well jump into Bitcoin, something that, again, is open source, transparent, and is open to everybody. I was even talking to you pre-show about how Bitcoin really creates this unity where no matter where you're from, no matter, what your socioeconomic status is, you can enter Bitcoin, you can enter a decentralized financial ecosystem and be able to send, receive, transact value instantly without any permission. So I do think that's very empowering, and that a lot of people should be educated on that. So thank you for educating the institutions. Thank you for educating especially the younger generation about open source technology. And I guess to wrap this up, Michael Saylor, how do you feel about the future of Bitcoin, the future of the digital age, and maybe the future of MicroStrategy as well? Because I know you guys are, working with a lot of institutions right now.
I think that Bitcoin has crossed the event horizon. With all the presidential candidates endorsing it, and with all the big investors getting interested in it, and with all the regulators endorsing it as a digital commodity, I think it's pretty clear that it's an asset class that is being accepted by the world. And I said tongue in cheek a while ago, I said, look, if it's not going to zero, it's going to 1,000,000. If it's either an asset class or it isn't. And if it is an asset class, and at this point, there's no other asset class that had 4 presidential candidates endorse it. There's no other asset class that is the center of discussion of every television commentator, of every regulator, of every technologist. So if it is an asset class, then it's only 1% penetrated, which means that we've got a long way to go here as everybody else starts to adopt it. So I think Bitcoin has moved through its most difficult years. The rest of the crypto economy has rationalized. So people that were selling Bitcoin are bankrupt. Everyone that was lending out Bitcoin has gone bankrupt. Everyone that was shorting it has gone bankrupt. And so if you look at all the meltdowns, starting with Do Kwon and Terra and Luna and Three Arrows and Celsius and BlockFi and Voyager and FTX and Alameda and the like, if you look at all them, they all have one thing in common. They weren't focused on Bitcoin. They actually were trying to juggle razor blades, and they were pursuing other complicated things. The simple idea is buy Bitcoin, hold Bitcoin, support Bitcoin, educate the world on Bitcoin. And people that are doing that have been extraordinarily successful over the past few years. Those that stray from that laser-like focus have been failing, going bankrupt and blowing up and, getting arrested and getting sued. So I think that we're poised for the next expansion here. I expect that the crypto industry has been educated. People are realizing that Bitcoin is a better asset than ever. I think the mainstream investors are arriving, the BlackRocks and the Fidelities of the world. I think the mainstream politicians are embracing Bitcoin. I think the use case for Bitcoin has never been clearer. I think the technology plugged into Bitcoin, like the Lightning Network, has never been better. If you look at exchanges like Binance and Coinbase, they're plugging Lightning in. You see Lightning getting rolled out into all sorts of mobile apps and web apps. So I think that the future looks bright for Bitcoin. I think the future looks bright for everyone that's laser-like focused on how they can improve their product or their service with Bitcoin. I think the Bitcoin is creeping its way on the balance sheets of more and more families and more companies and more institutions. I think there's regulatory clarity coming in the form of more favorable accounting, like fair value accounting, which is going to be very beneficial for companies that want to own Bitcoin. I think regulatory clarity over the definition of a digital commodity is very helpful.
I agree.
And so I think that there's just a stream of very bullish fundamental developments that have improved the outlook for Bitcoin over the past year. And I think the next year is going to be a good one for us all. I'm looking forward to it.
Absolutely. I think peer-to-peer payments, being your own bank, especially we're seeing like a lot of banks that I saw a study that came out that said within the first quarter of this year, 722 banks lost over 50% of their capital. That's really scary. So again, you need to be your own bank. You need to own your value, have something you're in control of. And I'm happy that we kind of went through this bear market to get rid of these bad actors that, they were trying to make Bitcoin look bad and cryptocurrency look bad because of these bad business practices when like FTX, that was just fraud. That was bad business practices. Has nothing to do with Bitcoin. So I am happy that we're educating on that and that we're getting to move past that so that we can expand. In my eyes, we can't have mainstream adoption if we have some bad tech and some bad actors in the space. We need to wash that out so that way we can kind of start anew, but with tech that we know we're confident in and can continue to build upon. So I really appreciate that. And is there anything you would like to share, Michael Saylor, before we head out? What are your thoughts on like life? You could give a thought, speak from the heart. It could be about space. It could be about being a pilot. It could be about music. It could be about anything you want. And please drop any links or any suggestions as to where people can find you and information about what you're doing afterwards.
Well, I guess what I would say is people should focus on what's really important. And I think what's really important right now is Bitcoin and the entire idea of a digital monetary network and digital property. And so first, make sure you really understand it and you understand the implications of it. I think many people underinvest in that. I feel like when I was growing up, I overinvested my time in a bunch of subjects and skills that weren't that useful. And I underinvested my time in studying things like money or economics that are extremely important. So you have the opportunity to learn that. I would encourage everyone to learn that. Before you invest your money in something, invest your time in it to really understand it. And we've never had a greater opportunity to learn things than today. I mean, it's amazing what you can learn. If you go to hope.com, we've posted tons and tons of books and videos and courses on Bitcoin and economics. And there are free courses on Saylor.org. We have free courses on Austrian economics, on monetary history, on Bitcoin for everybody, on Bitcoin for developers. They're all free. And I think the great challenge of our modern era is there's too much of everything. So you can spend all of your days just watching chess videos. You can spend all of your days studying 1/1000th of whatever, right? Any subject at all. There's just too much of it. So you kind of have to master your time and you have to figure out, what am I going to spend my time on and what am I going to put into my head? And certainly you should do things that are joyful to you, but everybody probably ought to put enough monetary insight into their head so that they don't go broke, because it's a lot harder to get through life if you lose all your money. And And we're living in an era where the consequences of not knowing things can be pretty devastating. Like if we take Argentina, the peso was 1 peso to the dollar 20 years ago. And today it's 485 pesos to the dollar. So you would have to work 485 times as hard in order to break even if you don't figure that out. And once you figure it out, you realize I have to somehow get out of that system. If I can't get out of the system physically, then I have to sweep all of my excess capital, my economic energy, into a different currency system. If I go from the peso to the dollar, I'm going to get a 485x boost. If I go from the peso to the Bitcoin, I'm going to get something like a 10,000x boost. So figuring out these systems and then applying that practical economic insight to your life will save you a world of pain in the future, right? And so work smarter, don't work harder. That's what I would say.
Absolutely. Education is key. And that's what we do on this channel is we consistently educate for years on the fundamentals of this space, being your own bank, empowerment, decentralization, everything. So I really thank you for really pushing that thought, Michael. I appreciate you joining me today. Everyone, please check out Saylor.org, hope.com. Follow Michael Saylor on Twitter. I will have all these links. All of them are in the live chat currently. I will add them to the description later. I have most of these links already there. So thank you guys already for joining me. I hope you guys have a great day, a great weekend. If you guys haven't already, make sure to smash these likes, subscribe, share the stream out with friends so more people can learn about Michael Saylor's amazing story and about what we discussed today, Bitcoin, individualism, everything. Thank you guys so much for joining me. Have a great weekend. And as always, stay zesty. Peace.